Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Rosie Pryor. I'm the chair of the Lane Community College Board of Education, and I'm calling the November 16th meeting of our work session to order. Celia, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mike Eister,
Here.
Austin Fulnagi,
Here.
Lisa Fragola,
Present.
Holly Johnson,
Here.
Steve Mattel,
Down here.
Rosie Pryor,
Up here.
Angela Van Kraus.
Present.
So we are all present and accounted for? Very good. We like to start our meeting with a land recognition, and this evening I'm going to read it myself. I'd like to start our meeting with the acknowledgement that the land we are on is the traditional homelands of the Kalapuya people. The Kalapuya were stewards of this very land for over 14,000 years before their traditional way of life was forever disrupted and destroyed. We start our meeting with humility and reverence for the original inhabitants, the Kalapuya. Members of the board, are there any changes or additions to this evening's work session agenda? I'm scanning my screen of digital members. There being none, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
That was Austin, I believe.
Here.
Call the roll?
Mhm.
Did I get that wrong? Was it Steve?
No, it was Austin. Definitely got there
Okay.
first.
Definitely.
Okay. Mike Eister,
Aye.
Austin Fulnagi,
Aye.
Lisa Fragola,
Aye.
Holly Johnson,
Aye.
Steve Mattel,
Aye.
Rosie Pryor,
Aye.
Angela Van Kraus.
Aye.
Okay, so we have an agenda, and it looks like a really interesting one to me. We have lots of interesting things to talk about tonight. The first of which, however, is a presentation. Dr. Bulger?
Yes, we're certainly pleased to have an athletics presentation and by our Director of Athletics. But I will ask the acting Senior Associate Vice President of Student Affairs to introduce this presentation. Dawn?
Good evening, everyone. Chair Pryor, members of the board, President Bulger. It is a pleasure and a privilege for us tonight to provide some information about all the good work that's going on in our athletics program. I'm going to introduce Greg Sheely, who is our athletics director, to come and talk to you about all of those things. And he has a wonderful presentation prepared for you this evening. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Do I need to talk into this or can I use coach voice?
Well,
Is it better to talk into it? Okay. I'll do both then.
Digital
I'll do
environment.
both. That's great. Appreciate this opportunity. Just a little bit about myself. I was hired in the fall of 1999 here at Lane Community College as a physical education instructor and women's basketball coach. And then in 2009, I transitioned into the athletic director role and continued with women's basketball and I am still in that position currently today. So had a long history here and have really enjoyed my time. So got hopefully some good information to present to you guys, just to kind of give you an opportunity to scroll through some things. I presented some materials, and then as I was going over them again tonight, I noticed a few typos, so I apologize for that, but hopefully we can get through that with it. So I also brought a couple of student athletes, 3 tonight, to just give a little perspective from them at the end of the presentation. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. All right. So I gave you guys a narrative in your packet, but just kind of trying to do briefs with the slides here about the mission. Some people had some questions about that. Some of our ways to measure this, I think measuring the student and measuring the athlete is a little bit more tangible than measuring the person. But we have them for 2 years and we're hoping that we influence them, that their student athlete experience here is positive, that they're empowered to get involved within their community when they return home and be a positive factor. There's ways that we can measure that informally with a lot of our student athletes as they move on and they have their success rates through their academics, but also a lot of them will continue to come back and mentor. We have, over the years, I've been here 24 years, and a lot of my assistant coaches have been former student athletes that have played in our program. And so their opportunity to give back. Currently, I have a volunteer strength and conditioning coach who's a former player of mine who our student athletes really love, and she's volunteering her time. So those are some ways that we can measure that. And so trying to answer that. We are part of the Northwest Athletic Conference. We joined in 1982, I believe, is when it was. It used to formerly be just the Washington schools. The Oregon Community College was a part of the National Junior College Association. They defected from that, joined the NWAC, and that is where we have been ever since. The NWAC currently consists of 36 community colleges in Oregon, Washington, one in Idaho, and one in British Columbia. Our programs currently, we have 10. Men's and women's cross country, men's and women's soccer, and women's volleyball. All 5 are fall sports. Men's and women's basketball, which is considered a winter sport, even though it transitions over fall and winter. And then we have men's and women's track and field and men's baseball, which is considered spring sports, even though they are continuing to train throughout the entire year. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Wanted to kind of gear this presentation towards Dr. Bolger's 3 stated I don't want to call them mission statements, but ideas and some direction that she's given the college and how we can help contribute to that. And so I wanted to start off with enrollment. Some of you, Rosie, were you still here in 2016? Were you on the board? So Rosie, you were part of the board approved addition. Mike, were you on the board?
Can't remember.
Okay. Well, in 2016, the board approved as part of a strategic enrollment plan to add men's soccer and women's volleyball. And so we added those sports and we grew from 8 to 10 programs during that time. And since that time, as you can tell in my notes there, basically 187 full-time students. They fluctuate term to term, but when I'm giving averages, I'm talking about the entire year. So throughout the fall, winter, spring, we've averaged 187 full-time students. The thing that I really am proud about is that during the COVID pandemic, when students were not attending, we actually grew and maintained a strong presence through COVID, as you can see with 192 student athletes throughout those last 3 years of the COVID, towards the end of COVID, through the full year of COVID, and then as we're coming out of it. So really felt that we were able to maintain a strong full-time presence with that. And then academic successes that we've had since 2016. When I say completion rate, that's basically out of all the classes that our student athletes attempt, they're passing 84.7% of those over those 6 years, which is a pretty high number with an average GPA of a 2.78, which I like the success rate higher than the GPA, in my opinion. I think just that success and that continuation is really good with that. So really feel strong about how we can contribute to enrollment here at Lane Community College. Go ahead and go to the next slide. The fiscal responsibility, fiscal condition of the college and how we can contribute to that. First of all, I just want to make it clear that I really feel that we are good stewards with the little bit of money that the college gives us. We do a heck of a job and make sure that we work well with that, and we have student athletes to do that. Some of the numbers that I presented in my packet had to do with just tuition above waivers. So our student athletes are allowed to get tuition waivers, but that does not cover all of their tuition. About 44% of all the tuition, the credits that are attempted are waived. So you can see that there's a significant amount above the amount of waivers that we still contribute. And then over the 6 years, that above fee has contributed the 2.84 million above the waivers. That does not include the other things that our student athletes contribute with just the general fees, the student activity fees, the class fees. Doesn't include some of the outside revenues or the fundraising that our student athletes also contribute. So not bad. And then something that's not really thought of very often, but in the athletics world, we're always having to justify ourselves. So we've had a lot of informal surveys taken throughout the Northwest. When a student athlete commits to a college, a lot of times, especially at a community college, they don't want to go by themselves. So they grab a buddy or a friend and bring them with them. And so we've had anywhere from 0.5 to 1.1 additional students that are non-waivered, that are full tuition paying students that come with those. And so, we try to grasp onto that and claim that that's part of our revenue generation and what we bring to the campus. And so there's no, I tried to look up and see if there were any national studies like that, but I don't think anybody does that. So, but we were doing it here in the Northwest. I already talked about the tuition waivers, but not all students, only 44%. Some of the other things that I think that we contribute when it comes to physical conditioning is some of the partnerships that athletic department and our student athletes have cultivated within the community. EMFC, Eugene Metro, formerly Eugene Timbers, they've changed their names back and forth about 3 or 4 times now. They're back to Eugene Metro. We've had over a 10-year partnership with them that was cultivated through the athletic department for facility rentals. And they have been outstanding partners. Tracktown USA, which was part of the World Championships, that was cultivated, I think, in the 2004 Olympic trials. They were using South Eugene as their practice site. And through our efforts, we got them to go here, the Junior Worlds in 2009. We have Pac-12 championships. We've had NCAA championships. They use our track and pay facility rental to use that because it's an amazing facility. And it is IAAF approved. So they really, really appreciate that. Some other things. The OSAA, Oregon Scholastic Athletic Association, we just completed our 51st year as the host of the state cross country meet. Over 5,000 spectators and students participated on November 5th. Beautiful day. We had rain, no rain. The rain held off until the last race of the day. It was a pretty amazing sight. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been out here on a Saturday, first Saturday in November to see that, but it's pretty cool. And again, all of these things that we're talking about with Eugene Metros, the summer camps, the ID camps, and the associations, prospective students are coming to our campus and they're experiencing our campus and having an opportunity to see firsthand what it's like. So we're really thinking we're doing a good job of actively, informally recruiting some prospective students. And obviously cross country, they're maybe prospective student athletes. So that's really, really important to us. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. Ways that we feel that we contribute to the campus culture. We actively, our coaches actively recruit. We're allowed to now recruit the world. We work with the international department. We can recruit locally. We can recruit regionally. It's not always financially beneficial to, recruit nationally, but when kids from outside the area, young men and women show an interest in Lane Community College, we can reach out with that and we can follow through with that. When I started in 99 through about 2009, we were literally a region-based recruitment only. And so getting students to come to our campus from throughout the United States, I think in my narrative, currently we're represented by 9 different countries and 11 different states on our current rosters. So pretty exciting when it comes to that. We did a survey in 2018 for some things that were being presented. And at that time, 30% of our student athletes listed an ethnicity of non-white. Our academic achievements generate visibility, promote pride. Our athletic achievements generate visibility within the community and promote pride. We reach across the campus working, like I said, with the international department as a partner right now. Titan Court, we've worked with them. And it's just an opportunity for people to get an experience that maybe that they wouldn't. It's really difficult to try to compete with the people over the hill, and we're in the shadow of them all the time. But you'd be amazed at some of the things that are accomplished throughout our history here. Most recently, I've bragged about this, and maybe you've read it before, but last year our our student athletes, we finished 5th in the Daktronics Cup. So basically the Daktronic Cup is a nationwide community college, junior college cup that's awarded for postseason competition. So when your teams qualify for postseason competition, you get points. And we finished 5th on the West Coast. That's the state's division, 117 community colleges in California, 36 in Oregon and Washington. And we were 5th. That's the highest we've ever been. And then 13th nationally. And so that was impressive, with 8 of our 10 programs finishing in the postseason and doing really well. So that was good. I don't know if you guys know that in 2003, Tom Pappas, former decathlete at Lane Community College, won the world championship. He is a big believer in community college. He's from just up the road in Applegate, I think, small community, came here and blossomed, 2-time Olympian. Was absolutely favored to win the gold medal in Greece in 2004, but injured halfway through the meet and had to withdraw. So that was a disappointment on his behalf. Cyrus Hostetler is a 2-time Olympian javelin thrower. And we also have Keenan Middleton, who was drafted in the 3rd round recently, is by the Angels, is currently on the major league roster with the Arizona Diamondbacks. So just some kind of cherry picking a few top-notch ones there, but people that we're really proud of right there. And then also we have a student athlete leadership group, which some of these people are members of, and they really coordinate some of the community outreach that we do. We have had a long standing with the Whitaker Community Dinner, trying to get back involved with that since the COVID situation. But we would have teams that would come over with the culinary department and help, peel potatoes and stuff. We had student athletes that would show up the day of and help serve, hand out things. We would collect warm clothing and money so they could buy, sleeping bags to hand out. So that we really feel that's been a great partnership. The cancer awareness events that are the Dig Pink in the volleyball, the Play for K, and the Coaches versus Cancer in the basketball season. We don't charge admission to those games, and we just collect. And it's nothing that's overly whelming as far as a dollar amount, but again, I think it's a contribution, and it just again helps our student athletes and our students understand that giving back is important, and supporting the community as well. We have community visits that are arranged. We've had student athletes go out in elementary schools and visit hospitals and children, and it's pretty cool. Even just little old Lane Community College student athlete going out there, you get big smiles, and a few of them show up to contests, and hey, that was the guy that, the gal in my class. It was pretty cool. And then we've had a long-standing relationship with Food for Lane County as far as collecting non-perishable food items to donate to them, and then even with our own food pantry on campus. So those are some things in the ways that we can contribute to the campus. I brought along with me 3 student athletes that I would like to just have them introduce themselves to you guys. Just kind of talk to them a little bit, or they'll talk to you a little bit about their experience, and then that'll be the end of the presentation. And I guess if there's questions, I can answer them. And if not, we can maybe answer those at another time. But I really appreciate your time and energy. Thank you. Chloe, you want to go first since you're right there?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me take a piece of your time tonight. My name is Chloe Daniels. I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah, and I was recruited by many different schools up in the Northwest, and I chose to come to Lane because of the beautiful campus that I saw when I visited here. It really wowed me. And another reason was because of the atmosphere that my coaches showed me that they provided here. They're very smart in what they do, and they generate a lot of success because of that. And one last thing is because of the success that the athletics program has in total. I know that Lane strives for greatness, and that's what they achieve all around the board for athletics. And so, yeah, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
What's your sport?
Oh, women's basketball. Sorry. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Hey there, I'm Danny Ortiz. I'm part of the men's soccer program, and I was recruited by a couple NWAC schools, but I chose Lane because of the campus we have and the way Max recruited me, my coach, and just what I knew I'd be capable of doing here at Lane than I would be able to do at any other school. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Devin Hinton. I play for the men's basketball team, and I'm based out of Bay Area, California. And so I was actually a transfer. So I actually was at a school in California, and it was a bad situation. I didn't really like it a lot. And I ended up getting recruited by 11, 12 schools, but one of the schools that really caught my attention was Lane. And the coaches are just always really big on like striving for greatness. And my biggest thing was education as well. Nobody in my family has graduated college. So I wanted to be the first one to graduate college. And so our coaches are always very big on study halls, grades, all those kind of things. I've never had a coach coming to my class, making sure I'm in the first row until the first week here. And so that's when I knew like, okay, this is real. And so those things I really appreciate, especially me being a young man, in this generation now, like these things are really, pretty huge. And then with basketball as well, the team is awesome. Just not even just the team, just the programs. Like Greg, since day one, has always, been there for me, giving me fruit snacks all the time. Like just things like that, go a long way. And I love it here. So yeah, any questions?
Wonderful. That's great.
So I'm actually studying, so I did kinesiology in California, but now I'm doing medical terminology. So yeah.
Great. I'd be curious to know, can I ask the other, what are you also studying?
I'm in business right now.
Business. Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, go ahead.
It's not just for you, it's just in
Okay.
general. For Greg, I know several athletic directors, and I know that you don't get to sleep much because you've always got a game or practice to go to if you're not recruiting. So thank you for that hard work. I know that there's a lot to it that people never see, but you wouldn't have a program if you didn't do it. To the students, I want to commend you on your decision to come here. I think you were really wise to recognize the value of Lane, but also I want to recognize the commitment it takes to be a student athlete.
Oh yeah, seriously, I just got out of practice, so. But yeah, thank you.
It's
Appreciate that.
a real discipline. And I commend you on your wisdom in doing it, because that discipline is going to help you throughout your whole life.
Yeah, and it starts with you guys too. So we couldn't do it without you guys. So thank you very much. All right, thank you.
Steve?
Also wanted to really appreciate the presentation. Thank you, Greg, and thanks to the students for giving us a little bit of their time. Just a couple of things. So for one, I just wanted to thank Rosie and Stephanie for organizing this series of presentations from our faculty and staff and athletics directors. It helps me enormously to get a feel for what really goes on out there. And I just wanted to encourage others who will follow in Greg's footsteps to bring their students. It adds so much to our sense of the spirit of what's going on out there. So appreciate that you did that, and encourage those that follow to also bring their students so that we can learn from those perspectives as well. Greg, I know that there was some emails out front about just trying to get a fuller picture of the budget, and that's not meant as a criticism, or I don't mean to put you on the defensive, but it's just sort of useful information for the board to have. There are, and we'll be clear, there are programs that we have that that are kind of net positive. There's those that are not, and we value them in a range of ways. So it's not the only metric by any long shot, but it's an important one nonetheless. So I appreciate that follow up. I don't expect that information right here and now. The other thing that would be useful, I think, to me, is to get a sense of the percent of student athletes who transfer to four-year degrees, to four-year institutions. It would be nice to know what our student athletes are doing after they finish their year or 2 years or whatever it is at Lane. So any information you're able to share with us about that. Again, I don't expect you to have that on hand, but as a follow-up.
Angela?
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation and for answering all the questions that I asked ahead of time, so I didn't even have to ask them here in your presentation. Thank you. And thank you so much to the students for coming tonight. I know that this is extra and you already have a lot going on in your lives as students. So thank you for taking the time to come chat with us.
Other board members have observations or questions? Well, I also want to thank you young people who've come to spend time with us tonight. I do have a question for each of you. What are your long-term goals? What are you aiming for?
for me personally, I definitely want to transfer to a four-year after this and continue my athletic and academic long-term pursuit, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's kind of my goal right now.
Very good.
Yeah, same here. I'm trying to transfer 4 years to state soccer as well. That can support the academic.
That's great. How about you?
Biggest things, I just think it. Any degrees as I can. I'm blessed enough to keep my academics. That's awesome. But I mean, my sports. That's awesome. But I want to do as much as I can.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you all for being here. And thank you for being the champions that you are. And we have champions almost every year, and it's pretty impressive. So, and I worry that our athletic teams are a little bit unsung champions around here. And so I'm glad you have the spotlight tonight. And thank you for your many years of service. And if there are no further observations or questions, we can let you get on to the next thing you have to do tonight, be it a practice or studies or whatever. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Board members, we're going to move on to board policies. Dr. Bolger, good night.
Yes, I will turn the time over to Mike Blake to talk about the board policies. This is the first reading.
Yeah, so following that, I'm sure this will be scintillating. So before we get to the policies and questions, I just wanted to kind of go over a couple of things. You'll notice two things. You'll notice one, we didn't continue on down the list. We kind of did some cherry picking. So all the policies you've got in your packet tonight are legally required. Just wanted to let you know that. The second thing, there's no crosswalk. Wasn't sure if the crosswalk was helpful, considering we kind of changed the way we were doing it. Rather than me going through every policy, we were just sort of asking questions. But I think it's become clear just in a couple meetings we've had with some of you individually, with Dr. Bolger and I, that the crosswalk was something you wanted. So you'll see that again. So don't panic. The crosswalk's not gone forever, just for tonight. A couple other things that came up in Florence that I just kind of wanted to go over really quickly, and these are probably things you know, but I just want to make sure that we're all playing, the same. We're all having the same information. One of them is how the sort of supremacy of things works, right? You've got federal laws, U.S. Constitution, federal laws, federal regulations, state constitution, state laws, state regulations. Then you have contractual obligations, right? So contractual obligations will trump a board policy if they are in conflict. So, and that doesn't just mean the collective bargaining agreements. That means any contract that Lane has with any entity. So we can't board policy out of a contractual obligation that we have. So, and then after that, obviously you have the administrative procedures. So just wanted to make sure that everybody kind of understood how that cascaded through. The other thing that was a little confusing was examples that I maybe used with some of those more controversial policies. And when I use an example, it's never an example that I necessarily am backing or that the administration is in favor of. I'll use for the speech, time, place, and manner policy I talked about Bristow Square. I would never endorse the fact that we would make Bristow Square non-public. That was just the most obvious example of a location on campus that I felt like everybody would know. I probably should have said the West parking lot or something like that would have been, but I just want to make sure everybody understands when I use an example, this is not something that the administration is backing as an example. It's just to try to clear things up. Also, at the bottom of the policies, you'll notice that very first policy, 5040 at the very bottom, it says see COPS, and there's a link to the COPS policy. So we're going to start including those if there's a relevant COPS college policy that relates to the potential board policy, so that you all can click that link and go read it. If you read that one, you'll see it wasn't very, I didn't think it was terribly helpful, but I just wanted you all to notice that. And then, finally, board policy 5040. I think Angela must have asked the question about the whistleblower one, whether we'd already done that, and we haven't. But as I got to looking through it, we've already done 5040. And for the four of you that are in the room tonight, you will remember it was the one where we also developed a potential HIPAA And again, I think Angela was at the sort of the forefront of saying, hey, don't we need a HIPAA policy? And we came up with one of those two to go with this one. So you've already adopted this policy 50/40. Doesn't mean we can't talk about it tonight. Doesn't mean we can't change it. Just wanted to let you know that. So with all that said, are there any questions about any of the specific policies?
Angela, is that a hand up? No.
It will be.
Board members, questions about the policies on the table this evening?
I just have a personal curiosity question. Like I looked at the whistleblower ones. Are they exactly the same?
Good question. They're very, very close, but they're not exactly the same. And I was going to bring this up at the very end. The differences are, if you look at it's sort of the second numeric list. If you have them in front of you, number 3 starts is disclosed by an attorney or his/her employee, which is different than the original policy, which says is disclosed by an employee's attorney. So that's a very small difference. Okay. Also in that little paragraph right below that numbered section, it says an employee who invokes his or her rights rather than their, and these are pronouns we may want to change back to their, which is totally fine. And then the last change, which is a little more substantive, is below the note for the recommended as good practice, the second paragraph below that, starting in the middle of the second line, after the word that all of that rest of that sentence, I guess it's all one sentence, probably not a terribly well drafted one since it's 5 lines. But all of that after the word that is different. It's actually, I actually like the new language better than the old language, but those are the only 3 differences. So yeah, it's not a big difference. The whistleblower one is pretty much the same, other than that language in that one after the second paragraph after the note.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from board members? Angela and then Mike.
Okay, so I think we're talking about 655 versus 7700. Are you recommending that we switch to, in those small cases of variance, that we switch to the 7700?
I am recommending that we switch to that we retire 655 and adopt 7700. Although I would also, knowing this board's preferences, I would suggest that we change the pronouns to their rather than his, her, or his and her, or his or her. So I can make that change pretty easily, but I do like the language better in 7700, assuming that you want to adopt that second half, which some iteration of this board did long ago in 655. So I would suggest that we go with 7700 with those pronoun changes.
Yes, go.
In the 7700, at the very end, we've got 1, 2, and then it looks like the 3 fell off, and we have 3 in 655. Is that intentional, or is that?
No, I'm sorry, the 3 didn't fall off. I didn't notice that. What happened was the starting directly is 3.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
sorry,
that's
that just the
typo that
number,
we'll
the
sort
new,
out.
yeah, I can fix that. That's just somehow the formatting got wonky there.
More?
I do, but I'll let Mike have his chance.
Okay, Mike, you get a turn.
Okay. I'm wondering if I would certainly be open to, and I imagine the rest of the board would be open to you just changing his, hers to their, wherever it comes up in the future. Might save a little bit of time for us. The other thing is I've heard questions raised maybe as recently as our last board meeting about COPS and board policy. And I don't think it's a high priority, but at some point I think it would be good for someone to go through and look at both of those and see if there are contradictions or things that need to be sorted out between the two.
Okay. Yeah, we certainly had planned to do that under Dr. Hamilton. She wanted us to wait till the end. So we have all the board policies in place. If we want to do that now, we certainly can do
I'm
that.
not suggesting that. I just want to.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, it has to be done. It just depends on when Dr. Bolger would like me and others to do it.
Well, I
How,
think getting
how
through the
far are we
policy-
from the end?
Well, that kind of depends on how so I had just been sort of plowing through 5 to 10 at a time, and we've stopped. We put the brakes on that. So I'm not 100% sure where we're going to go from here. Perhaps Dr. Bull, I don't want to put you on the spot, but
That's certainly fine. I want to respond to both questions, I think. But so what I understand is that the OCCA library that was purchased, I guess, by LCC is quite extensive, as you might imagine. The board certainly currently has policies in place. It's certainly at the pleasure of the board whether or not it would like to go through the rest of the OCCA library. So what I have asked Mike to do is to bring back all of the legally required policies, board policies that are in the OCCA library. And we've done that. And I think this represents the rest of them. I think there may be two additional after this. And so we thought that would be first. There are 2 other categories. Isn't that right, Mike? And so there's recommended, and what are the other 2 categories?
There's legally advised and then recommended as good practice.
Yes. So legally advised and recommended as good practice. And so legally advised sounds like something the board may want to take a look at. So that can be the second category that we actually bring back to the board. And then the last one, well, really at the board's discretion. We can give you a list of what they are, and you can decide whether or not you'd like to look at those in more detail, if that sounds like a good way to go. In terms of the college policies, what I've also asked for is for us to make sure that when we present board policies to you, that we also reference the college policies where there are college policies. And so that's why you see that in your notes today.
So just a point of clarification for my benefit, COPS or college policies are intended, are they not, to address the how? And board policies are more intended to address the what. In other words, for example, when we looked at a policy recommended by OCCA around time, place, and manner, really the board's charge would be to determine whether or not it desires the college to routinely have procedures to deal with time, place, and manner. That's the what to me. And the how that happens, by what means the administration causes that to consistently occur, to me is more of a how and belongs in those COPS policies. So it was very helpful to get that history from Jessica Alvarado, and very, very helpful to know that a lot of time and attention historically has been paid to that. And I found it equally valuable to learn from our legal counsel that there could be a flaw in how the procedures as they currently stand are applied. And I do think it's the board's responsibility to understand if there are vulnerabilities that the college experiences and to address those or ensure they get addressed. So I would also like some clarification going forward, kind of in the same spirit as Mike's question about the differences between Board of Education policymaking and this animal called college operating policies. I worry that we're confusing people when we call operating procedures policies. So
it can be confusing. I would say that there are in COPS, there are 2 separate categories. There are college policies and there are college procedures. The vast majority of COPS are college procedures. And I would agree with you that those are really the how, right? So your charge in most of these board policies is president, you go and make sure that this is covered, right? And so those procedures are how that's covered, but there are college policies. And so if you look at the hyperlink under 5040, that's a college policy. And so that's something that has come through shared governance as a policy of the entire college that didn't rise to the level of becoming a board policy necessarily. So there are, and I don't have the exact numbers, I didn't count them up, but I'm going to say there's probably 150 COPS policies and procedures, and maybe 25 of those are policies and the rest are procedures.
But just to, not to beat this to death, but the things that the college council would address itself to are operating or curricular issues, correct?
Not necessarily. So I think actually the college council would ultimately, well, I would say the way I believe it's happened is they've come through the what I would call the under councils, right? And the policies and procedures then have come to college council for tweaking if necessary, and ultimately a sort of a vote and then a presentation to the president, right? And so that's the way that it has worked for both policies and procedures.
I would also add, however, that it's certainly within the board's authority and responsibility to set policy for the institution.
Angela, I'm sorry, Angela, before you go again, Steve had his hand up. Can we give him a first time? Steve?
Thank you. Good discussion. I had a couple of questions. So one specific thing, Mike, for you, let me get the right one here. Board policy 5700, intercollegiate athletics. I'm just a little confused. So I think what I heard you say is that the ones presented to us tonight are, required. Can you just explain a little bit more? Like, why is it that we are required to have an intercollegiate athletics program?
We aren't. I believe this is only required if you have an intercollegiate athletic program. I mean, there are certainly community colleges. I came from one, Klamath, that didn't have any sports at all, and so this policy wouldn't be there had they subscribed to OCCA, which I don't think they did. So this is only if you have it, and I think you could easily add a clause at the beginning of it saying, if the board chooses to have intercollegiate athletics, then and have the policy. Because it is not required. You all could decide to abolish sports if you wanted.
Yeah. So to be clear, not that I'm suggesting that we do that, but I do think that our policy should not explicitly say, as it currently does, that we shall have an intercollegiate athletics program. I think that clarification that you're suggesting, I'm in supporting that. I think it makes sense that when we have one, that it should, follow these procedures and be equitable, that kind of thing. That makes perfect sense to me. But an absolute mandate that we have one, from now and forever, that doesn't make sense to me.
So I have Lisa and I have Angela.
Great.
Oh, sorry,
Oh, sorry. I didn't know you weren't done. Sorry.
No problem. So that was the one thing. And then just following up on the discussion, which is in my view, sort of around the confusion really between board level policy and to some extent, recommended policies that we get from OCCA and those which we should and shouldn't adopt and have to and might, and it's confusing. But also those that have bubbled up through the college council, many of which, for all I know, make perfectly good sense, and we're glad that they have taken on that responsibility in our absence. So it's a confusing mix. I just wanted to, so I'm glad we're kind of working our way through it. Right at the end of the day, the board is responsible, as Stephanie just said, for policy making and ultimately it's an enforcement through our president. So we have to be clear about who makes policy, and if anybody else is doing it besides us, we have to authorize that ultimately or clarify, rectify it. So I just want to remind us, I think, right, that there's a presentation coming along at some point in time when Stephanie's ready to update us on governance procedures. But I would just ask that either as part of that presentation that we get some, visual to help us get clear about these three buckets that Stephanie just mentioned, the legally required, legally advised, and I forget what the third category was. And how many, policies we have reviewed under each of those buckets and how many might be remaining to go and how much overlap there is with what the COPS inventory looks like, because it's clear to me that we need to wade into it. It's also clear to me that it's not going to be an enjoyable, discussion. It's going to be people are going to have some strongly held positions about, about their authority, especially if the board weighs in and says, well, we need to adjust some of this. That's going to be very difficult. So before we do, I just would want to get very clear about, what that all looks like.
We'll certainly make sure that happens.
Okay. Now I have Lisa and Angela.
So I just wanted to say that I had mentioned the same concern about board policy 5700 that Steve identified. I, by all means, support intercollegiate athletics, but was uncomfortable that we have a policy that sounds like it requires it. I understand the intent of this policy is a Title 10 intent. So I would support the change that he suggested. But my other questions kind of go back to our housekeeping around policies. When I first joined the board, some of you might remember we were required to review policies, or we are required to review policies.
We are required.
And we were like horribly backlogged. And so I'm hoping that we're also tracking that requirement. Because as we're working through all these other policies, are we also reviewing the policies in the timely order that we need to be reviewing them? I know Brett knows exactly what I'm talking about. So I don't need to answer that today. It's just something to be aware of. And then and we've talked about this before, as we're introducing the new policies into the library, like where are we holding that information? Right. And how and when are we changing the numbers and how does that all
We
happen?
talked about that today.
Yeah.
Do you want me? So originally, again, and I know this process has changed about 5 times. So especially for the 4 of you who've been here for the whole time, I'm sorry. It's been very confusing. It's confusing for me, and I feel like I've been the most heavily involved. So originally what the plan was is to get all of the old, I'm going to call them the 3-digit policies, all the old ones that we had prior to starting the OCCA, and I'll call those the 4-digit. So to go through all of the 4 digits and retire the 3 digits that we needed to retire. And then once we were done and we had, now here's our whole list of policies, 3s and 4s together, then we were going to renumber the 3s where they look like they fit and in the numbering system of the 4s. And so honestly, that was just going to sort of be like, kind of, it looks like it should go right in there. And so if you've got 6,800 and 6,900, maybe it's 6,850 if you feel like it goes in between. There really is no requirement on how you number them. That was the original plan. If you all like to do something differently, we certainly can do it differently. As far as reviewing the policies, we did go back and review all of the 3-digit policies that were coming for review. So we've got those all covered. And we also went back and reviewed a handful of the 4-digit policies that we'd already adopted because OCCA had updates, right? So there was about 8 or 10 that we updated. So we should be in very good shape as far as our updating. And then the last question was.
You answered them.
Oh, I did. Okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So as far as that numbering goes, I mean, I think it makes sense that we wait, and I don't think any of us realized how long it was going to take us, but I mean, I don't think we can number them until we get them all sorted out, but that sounds great. Thank you for that refresher.
If you do look in board docs, you'll see the 3s that haven't been retired are still in their 000 through 700, I think. And then below that, the OCCA ones are there.
Yeah.
So they're getting in there slowly but surely.
Great. Thank you.
Angela.
I have 2 questions. And the first is also about 5,700. Although my interest was more about the language, which is very gendered, and I understand that our programs are sort of defined and structured by gender, but I would love to consider language that is less binary. I'm hoping we can work on that a little bit. Also, sort of a process question or request, I suppose, is really, I think, aligned with what Steve was describing, some sort of just a better understanding of what the reconciliation process is, I guess, from when the board makes a change that impacts a COPS, be it policy or procedure, just what's the reconciliation process? Like, what does that look like? What happens? How does that trickle through? And I don't think that we need to make any statements about how it should happen, but I think we should have a better understanding of what does happen. That's it for now.
And I'm not sure if there is no reconciliation process, because we have not until most recently run into the potential anxiety that may exist somehow over the board establishing policy in areas where there are existing policies and procedures, college level policies and procedures. That's an answer. There is no. It hasn't happened before.
Yeah, and purposefully, again, previous administration, when we started this process, the decision was made to wait till we were done to then go back and have shared governance adjust any policies or procedures that needed adjusting. And so that's where we were. We weren't so there very well could be some procedures or college policies that have been impacted by things that have already been adopted. But that was purposeful, not because we weren't thinking that way. We were just waiting till the end to see what we had as by way of board policies and what they actually said, because obviously you all sometimes do some wordsmithing. So we got to make sure we know exactly what they say to compare them to the college policies and procedures.
Austin?
Thank you. Just to add to the board discussion in regards to shared governance and so forth, board policy 325, the board authorized shared governance to board policy, correct?
I'm not looking at it, so I don't know what it says. You want to read it to us? Are you looking at it?
I'm not looking at it right now, but I researched, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there is a board policy that authorizes shared governance for sure.
Always had shared governance.
I don't know. I don't have it in front of me either, but you're correct that there is one. And you're probably right with the number. It would have been in the 300s.
Excellent. And is shared governance also part of accreditation and the accreditation process? That doesn't have to be answered right now, but I just want to. Fantastic. Cool. Thank you for bringing that up.
Could you say that again, Austin? Is shared governance part of, and then I didn't
part of
get it.
accreditation for community colleges?
Yes.
And this policy review that Lisa alluded to, this is absolutely part of our accreditation requirement.
Correct.
And part of the reason we have devoted the amount of time to this that we have is that 10 years ago, when I joined the board and the college was on probation with our accreditors, one of the reasons for that was that the board had not been reviewing policies on a regular basis. So it's not really a question of which policies, it is reviewing policies at all. So, so what I've gotten out of this, Austin, your hand is still up, so I don't want to cut you off if you're good. Okay. What I've gotten out of this conversation tonight is clearly, and from the testimony 2 weeks ago about the perceived disconnect between the work College Council does in relation to policies in their perspective and the board and the work the board may do around policy making. Clearly, we need some presentation, which the president has already committed to putting together for us, that will not only help us understand the whole shared governance process as it currently stands a little better than perhaps we currently do, but also shed some light on the interrelatedness of college council policymaking, college employee policymaking and board of directors, board of education policymaking. So Steve and I will commit to working with Dr. Bulger and all the appropriate parties to make sure we get that scheduled. Given the lateness of the year, I would like to at least forecast that that's not likely to happen before the early part of 23. So just giving you a heads up. Yes.
So just to make sure, so I'm ready for what's going to be in your board packet at the board, the actual board meeting on 5700. I'm going to include a statement at the beginning saying basically if you have intercollegiate athletics, then I would request, Angela, if you could provide me some language. I'm not 100% sure what you're meaning by inclusive language. I understand men, women, non-binary, that type of thing, but I'm not sure how that fits in here. So if you could maybe provide that would be super helpful. And then finally, I wanted to point out, if you're looking at 405 and 6800, they're quite a bit different. They're both about health and safety, although 6800 is very OSHA-ish, very Occupational Health and Safety Administration rules, hazardous materials. So unless you all tell me differently, my suggestion is going to be to keep both of these. Because
So blend them into one.
well, we could blend the bullet points of 405 into 6800. That would work as well.
I was just asking what you mean by.
Well, I
keeping both.
meant to not retire BP 405.
Okay.
Keep it and then ultimately renumber.
I
it
understand
because
better
it's-
what you meant.
Yeah, it's different than, it's really, they're both about safety, but they're not really on point.
This is why we need our crosswalk.
I will
I-
never again come in.
So I support that recommendation from legal counsel.
Say that again, Lisa.
I support that recommendation from legal counsel.
Me too. Okay, so you know what you're bringing in a consent calendar to the board on November 30th?
I do.
We know what you're bringing in a consent calendar. So go forth, do good and avoid evil.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That brings us to the Bond Oversight Committee appointment process. And my name is beside this because we're going to have a conversation and decide amongst ourselves how we want this process to work. We may not be in agreement at this point about how it should work or something. And so we're going to sort that out this evening and move forward and do good and avoid evil. So here's the situation. We have 2 members of the Bond Oversight Committee whose terms are concluding. We reached out to them as a courtesy to learn if they would like to continue to serve, and they would. We have a 3rd member of the Bond Oversight Committee who is choosing to leave the committee. So regardless of whether we automatically or don't automatically reappoint people, we do need to and have commenced the recruitment process to advertise the fact that we have opening on the, and I'm using the singular because I don't know how we're saying it, but we have 1 or more openings on the Bond Oversight Committee, what it's all about, so that we can collect the names of interested people in our district, and the board will have the opportunity to fill the vacancy that we know we have. The question on the table that's been raised for me by a colleague is, why would we automatically, or how is it that we would automatically reappoint Bond Oversight Committee members who express a desire to continue? Where that came from was, I thought we had done that once already. As your chair, I reached out to our previous chair and said, didn't this come up once already? And we inquired as to the desires of the person whose term was expiring, or persons, I can't remember. And didn't we automatically reappoint? And in fact, apparently we did. So the precedent is that we have, as a courtesy, extended the opportunity to serving Bond Oversight Committee members the opportunity to serve a second term if they want to. Now, the question on the table is, do we want the process to work that way?
May I just provide some context? to-
Absolutely.
So when we originally created the Bond Oversight Committee, I think we posted it for all of the positions and advertised it as a 3-year appointment. And then once we got it up and rolling, and actually had gone through the process of identifying the first group, the recommendation was made that we change it to 1 year, 2 year, and 3-year terms initially, so that everybody didn't disappear after 3 years, and that we were then looking at replacing everybody after 3 years. And so like kind of that rolling through. And so then what happened is some people who had joined were then faced with a 1-year term. And so the end of the 1-year term, we said we would give them the opportunity to be reappointed so they could fulfill a longer time. And so this group that has come up, they are finishing a 2-year term, right? So they also were not able to serve the original 3-year term that they applied for. And so that's part of the context with what happened, with why we made the decision to allow people to request to be reappointed.
Okay. So that's the person, Angela.
So I'm the one who's complaining about it. So
Now you'll notice I never said complain, not even one time.
I guess, so what I was thinking about was the budget committee and how folks on the budget committee do not get automatically reappointed if they're interested in continuing to serve in the position that they're in. And so I was surprised that we have a different committee composed of community members that has a different sort of reappointment structure. So what you just said, Lisa, makes a lot of sense to me. If that's the precedent for the 1 and 2 year terms, I'm comfortable with that, but I'm not comfortable with reappointing after 3 years anybody who wishes to be without opening it up to the public and having a full consideration of folks who are interested.
Other comments questions? I'm not sure I am tracking with you with respect to the budget committee. I think we have reappointed budget committee members.
We have reappointed, but they do not automatically get reappointed if they wish to continue to serve.
Well, the board always votes on it. But I don't recall that we opened up a recruitment process if we had someone who, did we?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit different just because each board member selects the candidate they wish to recommend, right? And so let's say, zone 1, 2, and 3, each of their budget committee members are up this term, then they are all welcomed to reapply and then, or not. And then the person who appointed them gets to select who they're going to recommend. And so if they want to select the same person, they select the same person.
Okay. So it sounds like you're okay with us having reached out to the 2 individuals. I mean, I don't know if those are 2-year terms or they are 2. Okay, thank you. Okay.
If I may. So what I was concerned about was the sort of differing processes between committees as I perceived it. To me, it makes sense, having had Lisa's explanation of the 1 and 2 year terms being automatically reappointed if they wish to continue to serve. I think my perspective is that on 3-year terms, I would prefer to see that has a full opening to the community. If folks wish to continue to serve, they can reapply for that position. Other community members may also apply. We would treat it as a vacancy, and then, they may well be reappointed, but it might be somebody else who has an interest and a different perspective to bring.
And so 1 year from now, we'll have one or more 3-year appointees whose terms, we'll have 4? Okay, so 1 year from now, there'll be 4 people whose terms will essentially be coming to a close, and they'll be invited to if we follow kind of the direction you're suggesting, they'll be invited to reapply, but at the same time, we'll also open up the advertising and recruitment process, so there'll be a pool from which. Now, the other piece I want to remind the board is when we made our initial appointments, the process the board elected to use at that time, 2 years ago now, was a subcommittee of the Board of Education interviewed and recommended a panel of candidates for approval by the full board, and the full board blessed it and voted in support of that recommendation from this board subcommittee. We did not endeavor to interview bond oversight committee candidates as a full board. So since we've opened up this recruitment process and we're revisiting our procedures, I guess I need to understand from my colleagues on the board, since there are new people on the board, what is the board's pleasure? Do you still want to delegate the responsibility to interview and make recommendations to the full board? Or are you prepared to commit the time that would be required to interview? I don't know how many candidates may express interest as a full board. I need some feedback about that. Lisa?
I guess, based on how Angela just described it, it would put both processes in a fairly similar place, right? Like open positions come up, people are invited to apply. And then, we still post it every single time. I think there's advantages to posting it because we want to engage with the community. But I do think that there are some very specialized positions on the Bond Oversight Committee, which we found were difficult to fill. And so, I think in some circumstances, we want to be encouraging that continued participation. I also think based on having an understanding of the history and what has happened around the bond, because it's such an extended period, that I think I would also, I think that's a benefit to those people reapplying. So I guess I would suggest that we continue with the ad hoc committee. I mean, it was a lot of work last time. And how many positions did we have? 13?
Yeah.
13. And it was.
And I
it
don't
was a
remember
lot.
how many people we interviewed. But
We interviewed close to 20.
yeah.
And I don't ever think it'll be that large, but I do think an ad hoc committee could bring some recommendations. And but I would hope in that process that the value of having already participated would be weighed as well.
I agree. Yes, Mike.
I agree with the ad hoc committee. And I do think that it's that we should weigh the value of place of value on already having participated. Unless there's some reason that someone should, they were unable to attend most of the meetings or some other reason why we would not want them to continue to serve. But I would be inclined to give that some weight if they had done a good job of service up to this point.
Okay. Austin?
Doesn't the charter require an application process for the Bond Oversight Committee?
Well, for an opening.
Okay. But reappointment, isn't that technically an opening?
Yeah, I think it's technically an opening, but if one was operating under the assumption that as a courtesy, we would reappoint, it's sort of It's
not well addressed in that charter.
I'm sorry?
It is not well addressed in that charter.
Yeah,
Pretty
yeah.
vague,
Yeah.
because I remember doing that last year.
But we could also spend some energy straightening that out as well.
Actually, I
Maybe
remember
amending the
looking at
charter.
Austin changed committees.
Yeah.
So it's all your fault, Austin.
So I
Not
need some
entirely my
feedback
fault.
from other board members. We'll need at least 3 board members on an ad hoc subcommittee of the board.
This is not for this round, it's for the next one. Oh, because we actually.
We have
do
an
one
opening.
Vacant position.
We have an
I would be
opening.
happy to do what I did last.
So Lisa's one. Anybody else willing to serve? Angela and Austin.
Since Tom blamed me.
Awesome. So I think we have reached a consensus that we may be prepared to reappoint the 2 who have expressed a desire to continue and benefit from their experience. Yes, Angela, am I misstating? No, okay. But we do have to advertise, recruit, get our ad hoc committee to interview and recommend an individual to fill that 3rd position.
I just wanted to say that I heard 2 people in support of the ad hoc committee. I'm also in support of the ad hoc committee. I didn't hear from everybody else if they are
Either.
actually in support of that process.
It's a thumbs up from Holly and Mike and Steve. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, have we done this one?
I just wanted to clarify, at-large member means they don't have a special category that they're representing.
That
Thank you.
is my take, just as
Okay,
you
great.
members of the
Yeah.
board. It was, my understanding is it mimic much of the board. There are very certain ones that are very specific.
Yeah.
A faculty member or a staff member, but those are,
When does the term of the person who chooses to leave actually expire?
that's a, that you want to, oh,
The term will expire at our next meeting in January. The next meeting is January 21st, that Monday, and I'm assuming the term will expire after that meeting.
Okay, so it will be helpful if we can try to have someone we're prepared to reappoint by then. That's a pretty ambitious
It says that-
timetable.
It says here that the recommendation appointees will be added to the agenda as an action item for January 4th.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
soon.
I still think it's pretty ambitious, given the
Yeah.
holiday time of year. Okay, I think we have a plan. Which takes us to item D, which is a bond oversight committee update.
well, we need a new member. There is it. So I appreciate the discussion. I'll look forward to seeing some clarification on this membership in writing, perhaps, so that we can follow it in the future. But moving on, in your packet was what we presented at the last Bond Oversight Committee. This has been a process. It's a continuing process on how to communicate to the group. Combination of getting the committee to truly understand their role, which I think is not uncommon with a new committee of this nature, but they're getting there, as well as the nature of the bond program itself in its startup phase. There's a lot that, I think people probably got on the bond and said, great, I get to go see construction or do all this. And I'm happy to say we have construction going on over here now. Been very busy this week, but it's now at that point where we actually have projects going. We're spending some money. It's going to become at a very rapid pace over the coming year. So the reports start to become much more important. The package that was included in your package tonight was the package that was presented at the last Bond Oversight Committee. It is fairly standard. There's this chart that I've been using, and this is actually kind of a simplified spreadsheet. This is one I work with just about every day that tracks my expenses. We update it regularly. So I really pay attention to where that money is allocated, what's been spent, what are those things that we've committed to down the line. So I know how little money we have left because it seems to be going very quickly. And, people think there's a lot, but we have a lot to do yet as well. So really important for me to use this and it continues on. So there's that part of it. I wanted to make sure you understood that. One of the things going back to membership, we'll be in our meeting in January, we'll be confirming whether our chair will continue as well. I think that'll be part of it, that we do have a chair and co-chair. So I think that's something that has been indicated by the group that probably should be visited on a semi-regular basis. So that just for your information, that may be something that comes up. The types of information, one of the big things I'm on my third administrator helping me with the Bond Oversight Committee. So we've had a little bit of communication struggles on all of that. I think we've really come a long way right now. Some of the things Megan Miller has done a great job, who helps Dr. Stalliard. A couple of the things we've done is we've determined a header for all of our emails that come out from her, so that it starts with LCC Bond Oversight Committee, and then in that subject line. So they're all recognizing it. So it's getting these people to communicate. We've been meeting quarterly. Well, we have a quarterly update, and we've been meeting twice a year. Again, not a lot going on. So it's been hard to keep people engaged. That's been a challenge. So I think the communication helps. The other thing we kind of came to is starting last month, Megan is sending out an email. If there's anything about the bond on your board agendas at any time, that is notified out to all the Bond Oversight Committee members. And then we're sending them a link to the recording of the meeting with the timestamps when we talked about it. So they all get that and get to see it. So it'll have this monthly update. One of the things I think took me a little bit of time to understand was they're not as deep into it. I mean, I'm presenting to you guys fairly often. So getting that involved, so getting them to understand that and getting them involved to understand how much public communication is going on out there has been a big step. So we're doing that. They've requested some campus tours or construction tours. So
I'd just like to say that I'm perfectly comfortable with the committee meeting as often or unoften as it needs to meet. That the scope of the committee's work is fairly limited. And it does, I realize it may be hard for people to feel engaged if they're only meeting twice a year, but there isn't that much to do other than to oversee if what we're doing is in compliance with what we said we were going to do. And that doesn't require frequent meetings.
And I think that is, and they want, no, I think I'm getting very good feedback now that we're sending them the updates, because I think they're understanding it better and realizing there is communication going on out there. I think that was part of it, that we've really kind of gotten over that hump for now. I appreciate your comment, Mike, that helps because it is there. But they were, I think campus tours, we'd love to take you as we get buildings going. We are working with the contractors to set up regular tours so that we'll hopefully invite those a little early to go by. I mean, I'm happy if you're ever on campus to take somebody on a walk of any of our sites as well. So we have that. We have an email update in January to the group. We send that quarterly update. Our next regular meeting, it'll be a virtual meeting in April. Again, in July, we have an email update, and then an October virtual meeting. Those are kind of
So they're really only meeting twice.
really only
That's good.
together meetings
That's good.
twice is where we've been at. If there's a membership or things like that, that might drive us to have a January meeting would be something on that. But
Steve's got his hand up. Are you open to a question?
Sure.
Okay, Steve.
That's a comment, really. Just backing up what Mike just said, that the scope is very important and also fairly limited. And I think that's appropriate. And we don't help ourselves by making it more complicated.
Austin?
I really wanted to appreciate the materials that you provided in the board packet. At some point, I'd love to see a breakdown. I'm not sure if these are facility costs or what in regards to security on campus. I'd love to hear how that's been broken down and what we're spending that money on, the 8.3 million.
In here for security right now, it's just a broad allocation. And that's one of those that I've said, I haven't gotten to spending it yet, but I want to hold that money as a commitment before somebody comes and said, oh boy, wouldn't it be great if we did whatever? Because believe me, I get that a lot. I'm a very popular person. They think I have money. I have nothing else to add, but I'm welcome to take questions. Oh, Dr. Stallion.
Yeah, the only thing I would like to add, at this afternoon, around 4:30, we did receive one application to become a member of the bond oversight. I just want to share that with the group.
Good, it's working. Lisa?
So I have two things.
Okay.
One is I'm going to ask you what I said I'm going to keep asking. And so I'm still curious about what kind of artwork we're going to ensure that we're investing in and the percentage of the bond that we will contribute to that.
Yeah, I don't have specific line items on that. We have been, several of the murals that have shown up have been bond funded.
And the
We
one
have-
on the east side
Yeah.
of the center building is
The center one, as well as there's one out here, the three of them we've done.
yeah.
The health professions building actually designed into it at the entry points are some rather large graphics that once we get the building under construction, we're going to be doing a pretty broad, Grant and I are working, we'll be working with the art committee and we're talking about trying to get, yes, we want regional, but really open it up because there's some pretty grand opportunities for some art that's, bigger than what you see on the east side of center right now.
Great.
So there's that. We're working on it in some other areas within all the buildings. We're trying to incorporate possibilities with the iTech group. We're looking at some of the fencing, working with the art students to design it, get the fabrication group to fabricate it and install it. That'll be an ongoing progress over multiple years. So we'll have student work throughout. Maybe not huge money, but really bringing in that student engagement. So I think as we've talked about these projects, it's really a lot about that and how can we get that student engagement, that community engagement back in and show off what we can do
Great.
here. Because that's to me, that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. And, I've seen some really wonderful projects that our welding students have done in the community. So, that's another great resource we have.
Yeah, no, that's a group I've got. They've reached out to me on a couple of things.
Excellent.
And
Great,
we'll be
thank
doing
you.
some things.
And then I guess the thought that I had as we continued our conversation is I would love to know that the bond oversight as well as the budget committee are being broadcast very broadly in the community when the positions are open. Do we get it on our Facebook page? Do we get it on KLCC? I hear other governmental agencies advertising on KLCC but yet I've never heard us on KLCC for these types of things.
I can't answer whether it's been broadcast on KLCC, but I can say that I was actually looking. Well,
on Facebook.
Press release went out a few weeks ago, beginning of the month for the open positions.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then we've also had, we tried to plaster social media as much as possible. So I hope that the fact that we had an application come in today is an indication that some of that work is paying off.
Right, and I share with Megan too to call Jim and let Jim know we need some free advertisement from KLCC. So yes, we did reach out to him.
Great, thank you.
I had Austin in the queue and then Angela.
Hi there. Yeah, so I found out recently in regards to STEP dollars that if there's building facility upgrades that we're doing to help STEP clients or to help STEP students, that there's a 50-50 match. I just wanted to bring that up as part of the conversation when we're looking at these bond dollars and seeing if there's any opportunities for us to do a 50-50 match with some of these building upgrades, facilities, and brand new facilities that we're building.
Good information. Angela?
I'm sure nobody needs help on the topic, but I was thinking, what about all those folks that applied for the Bond Oversight Committee the first time that we didn't appoint? Are we reaching out to them? I think they had to give us their contact info in order to apply. So maybe some of them would still be interested.
All good ideas. Tatiana, did you want to comment?
Yes, thank you. Hi, everybody. This is not regarding the bond committee, but this is regarding the budget subcommittee. I just wanted to bring to your attention that per Oregon budget law, there is a change for this current year starting July, that the budget committee must have include, I'm going to read it to you. So must include one member of Educational Equity Advisory Committee. So when we searching for someone to hire for vacancies, we must keep that in mind. So that's all. Thank you.
Thanks. I read the text of that law today, and I'm a little unclear, and I would appreciate having our legal counsel review it on our behalf and help us understand what our obligations are.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And we will certainly do that. I think we saw it as well today. We saw it all at the same time. So we will do that and we'll get a message to the board.
Okay, thank you. I think we did it.
Good job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to take one quick 30-second break and make a special thank you to Jennifer Hayward for helping a busybody board member feel better about the artwork along the bus lane, the sculpture along the bus lane in front of Lane. All the years that I've been on the board, this sequence of sculptures, which all are tied one to the next and have an important message to impart, have been just overwhelmed and obscured by luscious, wonderful landscaping. And I have probably whined about it to every president I've worked with. And I sent an email to Jennifer and she said she'd do something about it, and she did. And now it's more visible. I'm not sure it's as visible as I wish it could be. If I had something to say about it, I'd tear all the landscaping out and start over, because I think the sculpture is more important than the trees and bushes, and we could plant very low growing stuff so that they're never obscured again. But if you haven't found that sculpture yet, I sure hope you'll go look at it in the daylight, because it's a sequence and it needs to flow. It needs to be connected, and it's beautiful. And it was, believe it or not, a student project funded by Lane Transit District many years ago. And we just can't let it get lost in the trees and the bushes. So end of advertisement. Thank you, Jennifer, for your hard work on that. We're going to move on to capital campaign. Dr. Bolger.
Yes, it's my pleasure to present to you a slide deck this evening to get your thoughts. The Board of Education has mentioned since I arrived that it may be time to enlist some support from the LCC Foundation for a capital campaign. The last capital campaign was around 2012. Well, any sort of capital campaign really starts with visioning and goals from the board. And so the reason for this slide deck this evening is to give you the benefit of our thoughts related to visioning and goals, to present those to you and to get your thoughts about a capital campaign. Next slide, please. We always begin with our mission in everything that we do. We are a comprehensive community college that's accessible and inclusive and devoted to equitable student success. Next slide. As I mentioned, the last capital campaign was in 2012, and we've learned so many things from our involvement in capital campaigns. The first is that telling a compelling story with a strong thematic focus always works. Strong community partnerships lead to success. The president's relationship with leadership donors cultivates further support, and we need a strong plan in order to optimize results. So in terms of visioning, we have two, next slide, please. We have three broad thoughts in terms of visioning. The first is establishing LCC as a workforce hub in Lane County. And all of these thoughts that we are presenting to you in terms of visioning and goals really have come from both internal conversations to the college community and also external conversations with the community. The second is expanding institutional capacity and partnerships in ways that increase student success and retention. And the third is catalyzing innovation. And I'd like to talk about each of these. Next slide, please. In terms of establishing LCC as a workforce hub, you may recall, many of you, that we had a speaker yesterday, Scott Van Pelt, who co-wrote a book called The Great Upheaval. One of the trends that he talked about relate to the future of community colleges, future of higher education, in particular community colleges, is a trend toward demonstrating toward individuals who engage in education and training, demonstrating competence. And that is exactly what this establishing LCC as a workforce hub is designed to do, to help individuals establish competence in skilled areas that are not necessarily only career technical areas, but also in the what we consider transfer areas as well. And to do that across a lifetime or across a career. And so you'll see in this visioning statement that we're including an alumni network. And the purpose of the alumni network would be to continue to engage with alumni of LCC who are across the nation and probably across the world, but also to do so with respect to their education and training across their careers. Next slide, please. In terms of expanding institutional capacity and partnerships that increase student success and retention, we have a focus on software that can assist faculty and student support, classified professionals, and other staff in order to transform our learning systems. We also have a focus on our physical infrastructure for, in particular, non-credit and community education in partnership with others, with local businesses, with other businesses as well, to develop talent locally and reduce economic inequality. Next slide, please. And the third visioning statement is about catalyzing innovation. And this is something that I have heard over and over again about the reinvigorating innovation at Lane Community College. And that's what this would do. And so it would be seeding the ability for the institution to experiment by creating physical spaces. They may be physical laboratory spaces and maker spaces in order to expand some of the data and research capacity of the institution. And much of this would be done in partnership with others. So in terms of potential goals, next slide, please. The first potential goal for the board to consider is long-term impact to ensuring that LCC is able to use the funds over at least a 5-year period. The second is stakeholder engagement, making sure that we garner input from the campus community on the funding priorities. And then the last is Lane County support, engaging the broader Lane County community to generate support and also investment. We want to thank you for being able to present this visioning and goals for your consideration, and look forward to the discussion. What we'll do after you have your discussion, we're hoping to get some direction. And once we have that, we will be sharing that with the LCC Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
My first recollection of talk about a capital campaign was several months ago, where I think it became clear that we were going to fall short on some of our bond funding. And so we were talking about bridging a gap to get some equipment that we might not have been able to afford that we had originally hoped for. That is a little bit, although important, underwhelming when you consider the potential of a capital campaign. So I'm very pleased that you are thinking of a capital campaign in a much larger perspective and longer range perspective than just filling that gap, even though it was an important gap to fill. If we didn't do more than that, we would be missing an opportunity. And I'm really glad to see that you and Wendy and the foundation board are looking at this as a big opportunity for the college.
Thank you.
I have Austin and then Steve.
I really appreciate the focus on a workforce hub. I think that that's really important, especially within the workforce needs in our community. Additionally, will a joint board meeting with the foundation be possible as we continue these conversations?
If it's your pleasure, absolutely. There could be a joint meeting in some form or fashion. We would certainly be willing and interested in putting that together.
What we have talked about offline, Austin, is the foundation board is how many people? 22 people. And historically, when I first joined the College Board of Education, there was an annual joint meeting. And my experience was that it was really more of a social occasion. Not really a work meeting. By the time you went around the room and everybody introduced themselves and said a word or two about themselves, it was time to go home. And so what we talked about as an alternative that might be more productive is a meeting of your chair and vice chair, possibly another board member, and the executive committee of the foundation board to really roll up our sleeves and talk a little more substantively. And we have a representative from our board to the foundation. And so, the idea that we get a subgroup of us together with a subgroup of them and have perhaps a more substantive conversation about, what may be the board's interest in fundraising and the future of development at Lane. So that's just update for your benefit. Steve?
Well, I think this is exciting. I'm glad we're doing it. Thanks, Stephanie, for your leadership, especially so early in your tenure. I just wanted to underscore, comment on the idea of connecting this to, the book that we were asked to read, The Great Upheaval. I think that, one of your slides said something about, having a really compelling story. And I really think tying it to, to that research and what it portends for higher education, and then, making clear that Lane is trying to, move into a space that fits what our best gets of the future holds and what our students really want to see from us. So that the stuff that Scott was talking about yesterday, the outcomes-based education, the just in time versus just in case, all of that stuff to the extent to which this capital campaign can demonstrate that it is, responding positively to that research, I think is compelling and aids in the story. So thank you for that. The other thing I wanted to say is that before really embarking on such a thing, I hope that perhaps the foundation, is commissioning, consultants or whatever it is to do some research and, to reach out to those folks who might be major donors and get a feel for what their interests and support for this are, so that we had some, intelligence there in terms of before we would launch a thing as to what the support might be in the community.
Lisa and then Mike.
Sure, thank you. So in addressing your question or comment there, Steve, in our last meeting, of the LCC Foundation, Dr. Bolger did present about a vision for doing a capital campaign. And I would just have to say that the reception of the ideas that she presented was just overwhelming enthusiasm. And so I think that the foundation is they've been, well, first of all, I'm sure we all recognize how much they love the college and the hard work that they do on behalf of the students here, but they really, as a group, think big, and I think they want to dig in to a big project like this. I'm not promising anything, but I saw a lot of enthusiasm. That being said, I think, this is a starting point, and you're correct, there's a lot of work to be done. But I'm incredibly excited by identifying LCC as a workforce hub. When I first joined the board, that was something that just seemed like a no-brainer, right? Just so obvious that this college would be Lane County's workforce hub. And there was actually some, there were some, I'll say, leadership in K-12 that really pushed back on that idea. And I think, there was this idea of having many hubs. And I was like, well, what does that mean? Yeah, how do you have a hub means something in the middle, right? So I'm just incredibly excited that we're kind of coming to thinking about that place, because I do think we're the place to do it. And I appreciate also the way the innovation is being described in terms of it being flexible and, having those maker spaces. So I think it's incredibly exciting. And it'll capitalize on the work that we're doing through the bond.
Mike?
I wanted to say that I think the starting point for a capital campaign is exactly what you've laid out for this board to create a vision. And it's the job of the foundation to, with the support of the board and work of the board, to raise the money to fulfill that vision. And so I think this is a very important conversation tonight. I like the 3 points that you identified. And I concur with Steve's point that we got some very stimulating ideas yesterday, and the extent to which we can integrate those ideas into the 3 concepts, I think would be to our advantage.
Thanks.
Holly or Angela, comments about? Thumbs up. Steve? Holly, did you want to comment? Nope. Steve, your hand is up. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, I did have a follow-up. I lost it. I'm getting old. This is terribly embarrassing. Would you come back to me in a minute? It'll come to me.
Okay.
I did have
Lisa?
one other thing. I thought we did have something in the works that would involve getting the foundation board and the board together, but more of a social opportunity.
There is a social opportunity that's in the works for January.
Good. I mean, that's a wonderful thing for us to do. What do you think, Steve? Are you ready?
Yeah, gosh, it's terrible. So regarding the workforce hub, on the one hand, right, that sounds great. And then honestly, on the other hand, I feel like, what does that mean exactly? in practice. And it would be really useful for me anyways, Stephanie, to have an example or two. If there is some other community college out there, or 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever, that you think is doing a great job as the workforce hub on behalf of its, community, especially a community that's somewhat similar in size and such as ours. That would be really helpful to me to put some meat on the bones at an example like that.
Yes, a couple come to mind, and I see Grant taking some notes, and we will follow up on that.
Great, great. Anybody else on the board comment? Question? Austin.
I also guess to Steve's point, there's also examples of education corridors as well, where there's like a lot of partnerships with higher education institutions throughout like the different state partnerships and stuff. And we kind of have that here with Pacific University being on campus and stuff like that. But yeah, I like the concept of a workforce hub even more so because yeah, we can develop those partnerships. We can develop public-private partnerships. Yeah, I'm sure some examples will come up, but an example that I can think of off the bat is education corridors, where multiple institutions are being served in one campus type of environment. And yeah, but again, I really like the not only the marketing capabilities of this for a capital project, but also as just like a community center for workforce development.
Mike.
I'd just like to thank the foundation, commend the foundation one more time. I know this is going to be a lot of work, and it's a whole new area of work that maybe wasn't laid out in a work plan that you started with at the beginning of your year. I'm glad you look at it that way.
Yeah,
because,
really.
It's so important to the college, and it's just going to mean so much to us. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bulger, for helping the board with the visioning process for a capital campaign. I remember coming to campus before I was on the board, and I joined the board in 2011. When the capital campaign for the health and wellness building was underway. And it was a magnificent campaign chaired by 2 vaunted community leaders who, from what I could observe, put their heart and soul into the campaign and culminated in blowing past the initial, I'm going to make it up, but on the order of $22 million or $21 million goal to like 29 million, on that order of magnitude. And I have never, ever forgotten that level of support and dedication to Lane Community College that exists among our district. And I am convinced personally that there are $30 or $40 million out there with Lane's name on it, and we only need to go and ask for them. When we listened to Scott Van Pelt talk yesterday, and when we listened to a panel of faculty talk yesterday, the common thread for me was, how can we pay for this? How can we pay for this? How can we pay faculty what they're worth and what we should be? How can we compensate them for the dedicated time that they put in? Mike and I have talked offline about this. To see part-time faculty offering so much of themselves and so much of their time to Lane. So we need to go find the support that exists for Lane, and we need to think differently about a willingness to roll up our sleeves and get that work done. And I'm really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be wildly successful. I'm knocked out by the caliber of people on the LCC Foundation board. These are people who have every capability of finding us $40 million. And I'm just making that number up, but I just want to demonstrate the degree of my confidence that this is a win-win for Lane and maybe a little overdue. And so we're ready. So thank you. And thank you, Dr. Bulger, and onward and upward. Yeah. I believe we have one more item on our, oh no, we've got two more. Fiscal year budget parameters, Dr. Bulger.
Yes, we'd like to have a discussion with the board about budget parameters for the next fiscal year. I'll ask Dr. Stalliard to come up, and we've got a presentation on this as well, just to give the board some information for consideration.
Good evening once again, board members, Dr. Bulger, and my colleagues. This evening is when we start our budget process for fiscal year 23-24. And I have a few slides that I like to share. Next slide. And I include that because I think this statement is very important. Together we will achieve success. So next slide. Like I say, on the agenda this evening, we're speaking about our budget parameters, budget calendar, and I'm available to answer any questions. So the budget parameters, the first bullet you see, tuition increase. Second bullet, increasing auxiliary revenue by 5%. So which will include any food service contract that is going to expire on June 2023 of next year. Any other contract that is coming up for renewal, I'm looking to increase that about 5% based on the contract. The other thing that I want the board members to be aware of is the board policy 245 ending fund balance, which is important because we need to make sure whatever we do, we are in compliance with 245, which say that we need 10% of our fund balance to include transfer at the end of the fiscal year. So I just want to put that bullet up there to make sure everybody is aware of that. The next bullet is enrollment increase. What I did, I put 0, which would be no increase, to a negative 3.5. And that gave us like a span to have a discussion, I think, where the enrollment is going. I must say our enrollment seems to be getting steady and improving, but that span of 0 to negative 3.5 will give us some type of room to work in. The other thing that I just want to share with the board is set aside some fund for maintenance. We need to make sure that we don't forget maintenance, and we need to make sure we fund maintenance, because I'm a firm believer deferred maintenance is not a good approach. We got to invest our maintenance so that our building and our infrastructure can be current and be well maintained and safe. The other thing I have here is compensation and benefit. As you see my statement, all groups $2 million. So I set aside $2 million so that when we have any discussion, everyone will know that the minimum we're looking for is about $2 million. And my last bullet is other. So any discussion that the board wants to discuss will fall under other. Next slide, please. Okay, so Tatiana is going to walk the board through the budget development calendar for next year. Tatiana?
Yes, thank you, and I'm ready. So as Dr. Stalliard just mentioned, we are starting our planning for next fiscal year, which is fiscal year 23-24. This calendar you probably have seen before. It's our budget development calendar. So it goes by months, and then we have to follow the Oregon budget law and to propose, approve, and adopt the budget. So far we are in November. Board budget parameters set was just presented to you. We are going to present update and initial projections at the next board meeting on November 30th. Resource allocations and prioritizations request initiated. What it is, it was called last year allocations and investments. So we changed the name to allocations and prioritizations and send those to departments. And then the College Council and Budget Development Subcommittee, BDS, is going to convene in November. So then we fall into December, January, budget updates. February is a student forum, and you might have to listen to different categorical funding decisions, and tuition rates will be addressed. Position approvals and what we're going to be looking at next fiscal year for positions and vacancies and increases. Then March and April, we're going closer to the budget committee to start their work. And then May is again board budget committee meetings, in June. We're going to wrap it up and hopefully have a good balanced budget. And we're going to start over again. So, I don't know if you will have any questions regarding this slide.
Next slide, Greg. Questions?
Mike.
So I like the idea of us setting broad parameters. That seems like starting at the big end of the funnel, and we will narrow that down to very specific focus and a decision at some point. What I wonder about is if we take the guidance that you've offered as the big end of the funnel, will that result in a balanced budget? Or do we have any idea if that will result in a balanced budget? Or
Well, Mike, according to Oregon state law, our budget has to be balanced. So I would say based on the board instruction to us, we will roll up our sleeve and we will come back to the board with a balanced budget, whatever that entails. But by law, we have to have a balanced budget.
Well, I guess my question is based on some skepticism that what's outlined here will result in a balanced budget. And I'm reluctant to adopt broad parameters if there's no chance or very little chance that a balanced budget can be created from those parameters.
I think when the board provide us the guidance, like I say, we will roll up our sleeve, we work with the president, and we will definitely get a balanced budget. So I would say, based on your guidance to us this evening, we will come back with you with the solution. We just need a little guidance to guide us down the road of success.
Steve and then Lisa. And then Austin.
Would you go back 2 slides to the parameters slide? Thank you. So I appreciate this. I think I'm actually the one who requested this based on my experience, just 1 year's experience going through the budget cycle. It seemed to me that there was, limited to almost no real board involvement in setting the budget. We approved it at the very end, but at a point in time when it was very difficult to, for us to have any real influence over it. And I think it does make sense that we set some expectations up front. So I'm all for this. I recognize, I think also what Mike is saying, well, if we do this in the absence of data, might we be creating an impossible situation for staff to respond to? And that is a good question. I don't know the answer to that. We certainly want to have some feedback from staff on this. Two of the budget parameters. I think it makes sense for us to lay some expectations out, but it also then makes sense for staff to come back and say, here's what this might mean in terms of impact. So I guess it's a work in process, especially since we haven't done this, at least as far as I'm aware of, in the recent past. With regard to the enrollment increase, I guess I just want to go out there and say I'm okay with 0%. I don't think it needs to be negative. I know it has. The reality is it's been negative the last multiple years in a row, but we have, also in the past several years, the budget anticipated a positive enrollment increase, 2% for this particular year. And of course, we didn't hit it. So then we immediately, find ourselves in, in a deficit mode with regard to that particular parameter. So for me anyways, a 0% enrollment increase in next year's budget makes sense until we can prove otherwise, until we can demonstrate to ourselves that we're on some kind of a positive trajectory. I don't think it needs to be negative, though. I think that has implications too. The other one that I wanted to comment on is the tuition increase. I recognize that it's almost impossible to avoid those. But I'm also with Rosie that, we may have, begun to even price ourselves out of the market. There's some concern out there. I haven't seen the evidence that of the 16, 17 community colleges in the state, we might be at the very high end of that pack. So I would like to see some feedback from staff as to, where we fit in with tuition and fees relative to our peers across the state. My own goal with tuition increases is not so much, a 1 year goal, 0%, 3%, whatever it would be in a 1 year, but a multi-year commitment to get back to the middle of the pack. And, so that provides staff and, the whole budget process some flexibility over multiple years, but to find ways to move ourselves, incrementally to middle of the pack. But before committing to that, I'd like to see where we really are and how difficult that might be to get there. And then I'm with George. I think we need to be clear about what we would set aside for maintenance. I think that there is some best practice information out there from the various kinds of maintenance organizations that we participate in. So I guess I'd ask to start there. What is best practice in terms of percentage of the total budget to be setting aside to devote to maintenance, and then kind of, dither from that point on.
Lisa.
Thank you. So thank you for the parameters. I do know can you remind me, we're going into the second year of a funding cycle for the state, or this is a new funding cycle for the state?
New funding cycle.
It's a new funding cycle. So we don't have any information at this time about our funding from the state. So that's something we'll be getting information on. That would also be a parameter that will be involved.
Yes, that's for sure. With the new governor, the new administration will undertake that activity.
Right. And I'm thinking about the auxiliary revenue. And I appreciate the categories that you have here, but I would also hope that we could be looking at some other auxiliary revenue areas that we might also be tapping into. I know those won't be significant, but if we're going to be thinking about those things. And then one of the things that we utilized in the past, we were often given multiple scenarios that came out of the budget development subcommittee. And so we could see the impact of, and I'm sure a lot of those examples are around, but we could see the impact at different levels of investment or different levels of revenue, so that we could get a grasp of what the impacts were based on, as using Mike's analogy of the funnel, as we narrow it down more and more, we could get a sense of where the shifting impacts might be.
If I'm not mistaken, on November 30th board, we will come back with what we call the projection, and Tatiana will have a spreadsheet that she will lay out for the board, so the board basically can see.
From the state?
No, not from the state. Not from the state. We have not, at least I have not seen anything from the state as yet. And I depend on my colleague over there, Brett, to provide, to help me, track down information. But as soon as we receive it, I will definitely share it with the board. I'll give it to Dr. Bolger and she can distribute and stuff. But on November 30th, we are coming back with what we call our projection, so that the board can see how how we're trying to project for the upcoming year.
Great, thank you.
Austin,
Tatiana could go first, though. I think she just had something to bring to the conversation.
Thank you, Austin. I just wanted to add to that on November 30th, we will have the most recent update from the state on what we anticipate to receive next fiscal year and projected numbers for future years, but that could change because they have a new governor. So that's what we're going to present.
It usually does change, so.
Yeah.
thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, and on that note, can we go back to the calendar, please? I think it's the next page. Thank you. Yeah, so today was the economic projections, which actually wasn't too horrible. And then like Tatiana said, on November 30th, there'll be like an estimation of what a budget could possibly look like. And then by February 1st, that's when the governor's budget, which is kind of like the focal point of like what we could expect to receive as far as like state agencies, community colleges, education in general, and so forth. So yeah, so I feel like those are really important timelines in this. Other than that, I feel like this is exactly what we went through last year, just less like kind of spelt out like this and formal like this. So I'm really appreciative of the parameters, and yeah, I'm in full support of proceeding with this. And I feel like in regards to Steve's comments, I mean, we as individual board members can be as active or inactive in this process as we want to be. I felt like I tried to be as active as possible in the last time we developed our budget, because I was just a new board member, wanted to get an understanding of the different budgets and so forth. So I feel like it is up to us as individual board members to be as active or inactive in this process as we want it to be. And same thing with our budget committee members that are part of the public. They could be as active as or inactive as we want to be in this process. So yeah, but with that in mind, having this kind of spelt out with the timelines gives us important dates and time periods in which we know when to get engaged and when to start asking questions and when to listen to stakeholders. I look forward to the campus forum. That's something I really look forward to hearing from our stakeholders, and as well as the student forum in February.
Tatiana, did you have something more you wanted to add?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that the initial projections that we will present for at the board at the next meeting will be how we see this current fiscal year, because we just finished the fourth quarter. And then based on that, then we would have to start working on what's going to happen next fiscal year. I just wanted to clarify that, because I looked back at how it was done last year at this time, and that's the information was presented to the board in November. And I hope that satisfies you.
Thank you.
I was just going to add, we'll have the documents from today's economic forecast presentation available in docs tomorrow if you'd like to review them. Austin, you had a very much a glass half full take on the presentation today. The state economist did announce that the state will be giving a $3.6 billion kicker back to taxpayers in the upcoming year, which would be more than enough money to pay for all of Oregon's university and community colleges to operate basically tuition free. So, you know, that is an issue, because when the kicker kicks, it's not just the amount above the 2.5%, which is an overestimate from a few years ago. It's all of the money that's over zero. So that takes away funds that would otherwise have carried forward into future budgets. And so that's kind of the downside of when the kicker kicks, is there's significantly less revenue for future budgets. And there were two projections. There was an optimistic glass half full projection, but there's also the pessimistic outlook, which does see a recession in the near future, which isn't going to impact us so much for the next 2 years of the budget, but the following biennium, there is projected to be a revenue shortfall. So if there are questions on that, I can do my best to answer.
there's reasons why I have a glass half full perspective on it, but I can express that off.
I try to live in the glass half full world, Austin.
Exactly.
Angela.
My question is not necessarily for you, Brett, but I'm wondering, when you have the kicker, you have the option to like send it to education, like when you do your taxes, right? Rather than accepting it. I wonder, do we do like a big sort of campaign to encourage people to donate their kicker back to education? Or like, is that something that like across Oregon, like maybe OCCA would be interested in?
Historically, no, community colleges haven't done that. What the push and as an option for taxpayers is to donate the kicker, since it's no longer paid back to taxpayers in a form of a check like it used to be. It's now a credit when you do your state income tax. And so you're given the option of donating it to the state school fund, which is what the state's also, and that's the fund that helps support K-12. That the state has also, through a constitutional amendment, changed the corporate kicker. So over $1 billion will, instead of going back to corporations, will go to the state school fund to support K-12. In the long run, any additional money that goes in to support the state school fund does help other parts of the state budget, because that money is there to support the budget, and general fund money can be directed elsewhere to community colleges, universities, healthcare, and so on.
Hard to imagine people would be very responsive in a time of inflation like we have it, but it's a pretty optimistic point of view. Other comments from board members about budget parameters? Don't want to, Steve, did you have more you wanted to comment?
I do, but it sounded like maybe you were about to make a comment.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I just want to encourage fellow board members to weigh in on, on what they think is an acceptable range, we'll call it for the time being, of a tuition increase, because where this often ends up, right, is, everything else happens. And then the only place where we have some, wiggle room to end up with a balanced budget, which is required by law, is to, to absorb it via tuition and fees increases. And, those discussions have gotten, I think, probably more heated in past years, especially as, folks have kind of, I think, started to rally to Rosie's perspective that, hey, we can't just keep doing that forever. We might price ourselves out. So I certainly see that and hear that. And I recognize that, that causes one set of values that we hold dear, that which is essentially pay our faculty as much as, we can to honor their work, et cetera, and our administrators for that matter as well. And to offer education at a reasonable price to our students. So it's very difficult. It's values I think we all hold dear, but I think it would be, I'm just encouraging folks to weigh in now, and so that staff have a sense of what we will tolerate. And I'll, go first. Like for me, I think in the last bunch of years, we have been above, significantly above what what inflation was, right? So our costs were rising faster than other costs generally, and certainly above what people could expect to see in their their increases in their paychecks. So we were becoming a bigger portion of people's paychecks, just because we're rising so much faster than everything else. And I'd like to see that stop, and I know that causes a lot of pain. I'm hoping that, I'll just throw a number out there, that we can manage our tuition increase to something no more than 2%.
Mike, and then Lisa.
I've got more than I could say, but I'll be brief. I definitely do not support a 0% increase. I think we've got to have more than 0. And the top of my range would be roughly 3%.
For tuition?
Yes.
Dr. Boulder, do you have a comment?
Yes, we actually do have a comment. I wanted Brett to give you some information as well. Brett?
So we don't have a lot out of Salem yet, but we do have the agency requested budget from the HEC. And we have a little bit of confidence that it'll be supported by our next governor. We were a little uncertain before the election because if there was a lot of turnover in Salem, usually the agency requested budgets would go along with all of the turnover. But the HEC, when they developed the request to the governor for the governor's budget, which we'll see in January what Governor Kotek proposes, but the requested budget assumes a 3.5% increase at community colleges each year of the next biennium. So if we come in below that, the level of state support of funding is paid out, assuming that colleges do that. So we'll have to make reductions elsewhere or adjust the parameters to offset that.
So when you say increase, you didn't attach what type of increase, 3.5% increase in funding or 3.5% increase in tuition?
Into a 3.5% increase of tuition revenue. They have the expectation that colleges will raise tuition.
I have Lisa and then Angela.
So I think that what would be really helpful is a past history of the tuition increases that have occurred, because I believe that 2 years ago, let me clarify that, past history of the impact on students, because 2 years ago, even though we increased tuition, was potentially 3 years ago, even though we did increase tuition, it was offset in other ways so that there was a zero impact in total on students. And that the tuition increases have, in the last couple of years, to my recollection, been very close to inflation. Another important element to take into consideration, I think, in having some type of overview of the tuition increase is that a number of years ago, tuition wasn't increased over a period of time, and such to the point that at one point it had to be increased significantly because of not accounting for inflation over a period of time. So I do really appreciate what Steve said about beginning to have a multi-year perspective. I think that would be very beneficial. I feel like I want to have an understanding of what the HEPI is in terms of any decision-making that occurs. I'm not inclined to put a value on it at this time in terms of where I would want to go with it. I don't think I would be supportive of zero, but I need to have an understanding of the HEPI. In addition to, if I understood you correctly, Brett, if we don't raise tuition 3.5%, we would be leaving funding on the table.
The agency recommended budget was developed to try to maintain a current service level. So basically trying to figure out how colleges can continue to operate at the way we are right now. So they are giving us enough funding that they believe that if colleges increase tuition revenue 3.5%, that will help maintain current service level.
So I think I threw a lot of variables out there, but I think that's also based on the fact that I think the staff has a lot of work to do to bring us back information that will help us continue down that funnel that Mike gave us a wonderful analogy today.
Angela?
I was curious about the 3.5% increase. Is that specifically by college, or is that over the community college space? Because from the deleted slide from this presentation, it looked like Lane was at the very top of the pack. So does that require everyone, even at the top of the pack, to each make a 3.5%, with the rest of the schools sort of moving it?
You're correct. The expectation is that tuition revenue from community colleges will increase 3.5% overall. So the expectation is that each college would then have a 3.5% increase. The slide that you referenced that was removed from the packet showed tuition and fees from 2020. And as you recall, the board in that year implemented a $5 per credit emergency fee, which pushed up tuition for that year. The following year, the board, instead of increasing tuition, rolled that into the tuition amount. And so tuition held at the about the same amount that year. And so it just wasn't really reflective on what tuition and fees among the Oregon schools are this year. That was a couple years old data.
Holly, you want to comment? Okay. Any other comments about parameters from board members? I'm going to put myself in the queue. Obviously, I don't support a tuition increase of any kind. For me, it's a philosophical issue. I am concerned about the fact that Lane has lost 60% of its enrollment over the last decade. And we've increased tuition every year over the last decade. I do think we are pricing ourselves. I think prospective students are voting with their feet. And I don't know a persuasive way to put that to my colleagues. So I would hope you would reconsider over the weeks and months ahead the competition we heard about in Scott Van Pelt's presentation yesterday is real and eating into Lane's market, if you will. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me that we continue to increase the price of a product that appears not to be selling. It's not a logical business practice that I'm accustomed to. I also hope the board will look carefully at the proposed parameter around compensation and benefits. Historically, Zach or whomever has put a place marker number in the draft budget. And this is an opportunity, I think, for the board to establish some concrete clarity for the president and her administration and for the campus community around what the board perceives the college to be in a position to afford, and has the opportunity to hold the line on that so that the president and her representatives can be transparent with the colleagues across the campus community about the resources that are available. Historically, the board has taken the opportunity to kind of move the line over the years. And so that, I'm sure, creates a lack of understanding and transparency for the campus community about really what the board's expectations are with regard to compensation and benefits. The good news is it's easy to telegraph a message that it's up to the faculty and classified staff and managers and the administration to work with each other around how best to use those funds, how to optimize the use of those funds. And I would welcome a budget parameter telegraphed by the board that we really encourage that and would like to work with our union partners on how those funds are best applied to and where the needs are greatest in the organization. I think they know really more than anyone can about the most optimal use of compensation and benefit funds. So I certainly would support that, but I sure encourage my colleagues on the board to, if indeed you think a $2 million guardrail is where that parameter belongs, that we would establish a commitment jointly to hold the line on that and ensure that the administration knows that is where we have established that particular parameter. Are there any budget parameters that you didn't see tonight that you would like to establish for the administration in the development of this budget? Mike?
I'll pass. I may bring it up later. I'm not going to bring it up right now.
Okay. Austin?
Just what I mentioned earlier, which was the governor's budget and the economic forecast.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it at all.
Oh, the economic forecast in May and the governor's budget in February.
Yeah, okay. I'm sure someone made a note of that. Any other questions or comments about budget parameters? Okay, I think we did that one. Dr. Bulger, have you got what you need out of that conversation?
I believe so. Thank you.
Okay, that does bring us to our last item on this evening's agenda, which is an memorandum that you saw in your packet from the Oregon School Boards Association asking this board to bless, if you will, the OSBA's proposed legislative agenda. And Austin, is comment about that?
Oh, just that I support it.
Okay. Anybody else? Is there a motion? Lisa? No, we don't do motions tonight, do we?
Oh, we don't.
That's right, we don't.
Sorry.
Both of us were forgetting that. Yeah. So I guess the idea is we belong, we've talked about this over the years, whether there's a value in belonging to OSBA, which has historically been somewhat K-12 centric. So if the board is inclined to support this, then we can take action at our next meeting. Yes, Mike.
Well, I was aware of Mike. I had that concern about it possibly being K-12 centric. I looked at it with that lens. I didn't see a concern. I may have missed something, but I'm comfortable supporting it, what I saw, unless somebody raises something that I didn't think of.
Okay. I think Steve has forwarded some questions about our involvement in OSBA. As we look at the budget going forward, we may want
I
to.
can provide some context about that. So when I was the OCCA liaison, so this is like going back almost 3 years, because I was the OCCA liaison before I became chair. We actually brought from the community colleges some criticism to OSBA. So the board liaisons asked OCCA to have a conversation with OSBA, and they eventually did come and give a presentation about our relationship. And I think at that time, the majority of people were satisfied with the fact that there are some funds of insurance. Maybe someone here can remind me, it's workers' comp or something like that. Oh, PACE, yes. What is PACE? Yeah, liability insurance. There are actually some varieties of insurance that we get through OSBA that benefit us extremely, that we don't have other opportunities to have and that we need. And so that's a very important reason we participate. But it was also emphasized many times that we don't have a K-12 education system in the state. We have a K-16 or even a K-18, and that the investments that go into K-12 ultimately are investments in the other public education structures. That being said, I definitely agree that we need better bridges between K-12 and community college, especially when it comes to investments. But I do think there are benefits to our participation in OSBA, and I felt like the entire OCCA board at that time recognized it. So,
okay. Good background. Thank you. Any other comments about this? An item we'll need to disposition at our next meeting. I'm just double checking, making sure nobody, oh, there is a hand going up. Steve.
Well, with regard to the whatever it is, the thing that we'll vote on at the next meeting, I'll probably abstain. I guess I sort of feel like, I don't know. I'm not exactly seeing the role for community colleges on this. I heard what Lisa had to say. I'm interested in, learning more about that. But I guess I wanted to put see if there's support out there amongst at least a majority of board members to ask staff to do a little investigation. I guess I'd like to just learn a little bit more about the organization, invite the organization's leadership to, educate us at an upcoming board meeting. I'd like to know how much we spend annually on this membership and what the benefits of membership are, the extent to which we as an institution take advantage of those benefits. Perhaps we are, and that's great. Perhaps we're not. And then we have to ask ourselves, well, are we going to recommit ourselves to doing so, or maybe it's time to let this lapse? I'd like to know the number of other community colleges in the state that also participate at the level that we do. Are we an outlier? Yeah, I'd just like to get that context. So that we can make an informed decision as to whether this is a really useful thing and worth whatever the cost is of membership on an annual basis.
Colleagues, are you interested in having that, Mike?
I would like for the staff to not have to spend a whole lot of time on this. And I think Lisa has a lot of information from her experience that she can share with us. Beyond the dues and how many other state community colleges belong, that's about all the other information I need. Staff is just buried with other things, and I don't want to send them off on another task if it's not absolutely necessary.
Angela?
I'm pretty much aligned with Mike. I'm interested in the cost, making sure that it is a cost-effective endeavor, which it sounds like it is, but never hurts to double check. But I don't think that I would be supportive of encouraging staff time to sort of go deeper into it, especially with the 3 priorities. I don't see exactly how this aligns. And I want to make sure that we're respectful of being that we're being supportive, as we promised, of Dr. Bulger's priorities.
Austin?
Having been on Education Service District Board and with Klamath Community College, and I forget where it was in the budget, but it's in like about $10,000 or so for membership, and quite frankly, a lot of K through 12 school districts, that's the bulk of their membership, obviously, because there's so many of them, and all the ESDs are a part of their membership, and I want to say almost every community college, if not all of them, are a part of it too. And I think a big part of it is that, yes, it is a K through 14 and type of association. OCCA does have a Oregon School Board Association liaison on the board with OCCA, and I believe that there is a community college oriented representation on the Oregon School Board Association. I am not 100% sure on that, and I'm actually looking through their governance to see.
There is.
Fantastic.
There might
Cool.
even be 2, actually.
Fantastic. Cool. So with that in mind, I'd see value in it because the collective creates value and the strength creates value. And Oregon School Board Association, even with their legislative priorities, are really similar to that of OCCA's priorities. The lobbyists for both work together up in Salem, and so there's joint efforts and there's joint work that's done there when passing budgets, legislation, rules and priorities, and so forth. So yeah, and nothing stood out in this legislative priority list that it affects community colleges to varying degrees. So yeah.
Lisa?
I'm in alignment with the guidance that Mike and Angela were recommending in terms of where we want to prioritize staff spending.
Okay. I would be interested in knowing what we're spending, and I would be interested in knowing how many community colleges participate in Oregon. I mean, are we an outlier, or are they all in the club? But maybe the way to reinforce our interest in, as long as we're a dues paying member, of sort of assuring ourselves that community colleges are getting their due, is to take up Steve's suggestion. And as we have invited the OCCA executive to come and talk to us, invite the OSBA executive to come and talk to us. And just the invitation alone would send a signal. What are you doing for us? Yeah, Lisa?
It just so happens that the regional representative to the OSBA Legislative Committee is a local school board member, and she might be willing to also come and speak to us about OSBA.
Well, Steve and I can work offline with Dr. Bulger to maybe calendar this, if board members are interested, and see if we can't get some FaceTime with OSBA and learn more about it. Austin, did you have more?
Yeah, and as the board probably remembers, I ran for that position and lost, unfortunately. But I promised the board that next year I will run for the Oregon School Board Association Legislative Committee and hopefully win and gain additional value out of our OSBA membership.
You go, girl. I think we did it. So we are at closing items. Future meeting dates are shown in your packet. We have a meeting in 2 weeks, a board meeting. The last, I believe it's the last? Yeah, the last board meeting of this calendar year. We have one more work session in this calendar year. Are there any? Yeah, Lisa?
Yeah, I'd like to flag that the National Legislative Summit for OCCA, they've identified the dates. It's February 5th through 8th. And I just wanted to flag that so we can, identify if we're going to send people. And
Are you talking about OCCA or ACCT?
ACCT, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, ACCT. I know I'm very interested in going in February. And I do think it is a really critical year for us to be advocating for. Well, it's always critical, but I think it's an important year to be advocating. So I just wanted to flag that for however we want to approach the decision.
Okay, thank you. So other board members, think about that. Think about whether or not that's something you want to do. Any other items, Mike?
Missing 3 annual affirmation statements from board members. So I won't call you out by name, but you'll be getting a nasty email from me tomorrow.
And if you don't get them, you'll get a nasty email from me. Okay, I think we're adjourned.
You done?
Awesome.